Hello and welcome to the Auto Riff. This week we are going to be talking to Fletch from All Things Overlanding about overlanding and about some other things, some other cars he owns. It's a great episode. Thanks for watching and listening, and we'll see you in a second. Thank you for doing this. I want to say
Yeah,
that.
sure.
So, what is overlanding? Like, I have a general idea of it. Like,
Sure.
explain it to a noob here.
Sure. There's if you Google it, there's going to be a definition that comes up, and it's kind of intimidating a little bit. I mean, basically, like the official definition is something along the lines of, vehicle dependent travel, typically over long distances, usually for longer periods of time, a week, a month, longer periods of time, sometimes crossing international border. It kind of originated in Australia, where they used to
Okay.
actually just have to overland essentially to like drive
To
cattle
get to the
or
next
move
town.
things.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But nowadays, I define it a little bit differently now because there are so many people that are getting into it, and there's so much negativity out there where people want to divide everybody up and like make it really super specific that you have to do these things for it to count. I just say if you have a vehicle and you rely on that vehicle to get you to a destination that you couldn't otherwise get to, and you try to get out there and explore, like that to me is overlanding. Like as long as you're trying, okay, even if you're in a Prius, but you're going out to a national forest and finding a camp spot and you're, cooking out of the back of your car, like that's close enough, right? We don't have to like over define it. Yeah. I don't think so.
Absolutely. No, I feel the same way about car enthusiasts in general, right? Like, because then you have your Chevy guys, your Ford guys, your Dodge guys, whatever. And then within that, like, for instance, so like my family is really big into Dodges or Rams, whatever. Okay. And like I have a Ram 1500 with a Hemi, but my brother has a Cummins, and he'll tell me that the Cummins is, the superior choice. And I'm like, it's just a truck. I like, right. Yeah. So no, like I understand that, like it's always breaking down, right? Like, yep. We like cars. That's just like that. That's kind of how my show is. I want to focus on cars, and then how you got to other forms of it is great, but they're all equal to me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Except for Prius owners.
I'm a Nissan guy. Yeah. Well, I'm a Nissan guy and I get it all the time. Like, you should have bought a Toyota or whatever. I'm like, Toyotas are great. I like Toyotas a lot, but they cost a lot more money. Like it just, I've always liked my Nissans, and I found a 4 or 5 year newer Xterra than I could find a 4Runner, and it was $4,000 less than a comparable 4Runner with twice the miles. Like it just didn't make sense to me, but I love them all. I'd love to have a Toyota. Sure. I'm not against it. I just, happen to have a Nissan.
I was going to ask you about that actually, because obviously you have the Xterra still, or had the Xterra?
Had the Xterra. So it's kind of a long story, but the short version of the story is I've had the Xterra for almost 5 years now. December would be 5 years. And I mean, I've put 50,000 miles on it. It was my daily for, the first 2 or 3 years that I had it. Okay. And it's been great. I mean, it was bulletproof. It doesn't get great gas mileage. That's the downside of the 4-liter in the Xteras. But aside from that, I mean, it's been perfect. It does great in the snow. And I mean, I've had it to West Virginia doing off-road stuff. I've had it to Kentucky, the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, over to Arkansas, like all over the country so far. I've been on all kinds of trips, and it's been flawless. But it finally hit a point where the maintenance stuff was kind of catching up to me a little bit. And I had a big trip that was coming up about a month ago. And I was like, hey, I don't have time to mess with doing it all myself. So I took it to 4-Wheel Parts, and they were like, dude, what have you done to this thing? Like everything is failing. Like your brake calipers are leaking. Like everything is beat to death on the thing. And I was like, well, that makes sense. Yeah. That sounds right. So I found a guy that I know that I bought some wheels and tires off of before. And he actually runs a fab shop for Nissan stuff, a lot of Nissan and some Toyota stuff. And he had a built-up Frontier with a Titan swap, which, if you're not familiar with that, it basically means all the stuff from a full-size Nissan Titan full-size truck will actually bolt on to a Frontier chassis.
The first-gen Titan or the second?
First-gen Titan.
First-gen, okay.
Yeah. So it's not, everybody always asks me, is it V8 swap? No, that's the VK swap is something different. The Titan swap is just the suspension, but so, it's got heavier duty components, heavier duty CVs. It's got the full size Titan brakes on it, so it stops better than a normal Frontier, and it's got 35s on it. And then of course he's a fab shop, so it's like fully armored underneath, sliders, custom front bumper, custom rear bumper with a swing out rack on the back of the bed. So that's what I recently changed. It was awesome. I love it.
Yeah. Did you
It
get the
doesn't
engine
run,
swapped into it yet or no?
not yet.
Okay.
So
That's
that's,
what I
I've
was,
been
yeah.
kind of talking to him, and I'm still kind of waiting to hear back. It's been a month and a week now, and I know he's busy and he's running a shop and stuff, but we'll see how that turns out. I mean,
Right.
I'm trying to work around his schedule and stuff too, but we'll see. We'll see how
Yeah.
it goes.
The last video of yours I watched was the walk around of the Frontier, but it wasn't running a Nat. So,
Right. That was, I shot that like a week and a half ago. So yeah, and
Yeah.
it's still not. Still not.
So I want to talk about a car I keep seeing in the background. And there's an Infiniti Q50.
Yep. That's, speaking of hatred, right? Mine is a 2014, and for the first 2 years, 14 and 15, it had the venerable 3.7 liter VQ 37 VHR motor in it, which is super reliable, about 330-ish horsepower, brake horsepower. And then they switched to the 3.0 T, and there is just tons of friction between the 3.0 T guys talking about how their cars are easily modifiable to 400, 425 wheel horse, versus the 3.7 you can't do anything to. And then all the 3.7 guys are like, at least my car runs, at least I'm not, because the 3.0 Ts are turbo and they're throwing belts and stuff, and it's constant fighting. But yes, I love my Infiniti. It's a great car.
So what have you done to the Infiniti? Because it looks lowered.
Yeah, so it doesn't seem like much. It's actually mostly aesthetic, because again, I knew it was a 3.7. I'm not trying to get power out of it. It does have intakes on it. It's got a Tanabe sway bar, strut tower brace bar on the front. It's got a 3-piece black lip, black M3 style mirror covers. It's got a black grille. It's got it's lowered on RSR Super Downs, so about 2¼ inches. And then it's on ESR SR01 19 by 9.5 inch wheels all around. And then a roof spoiler and a trunk spoiler and axle back exhaust that makes it just sound a little bit nicer.
Right.
And that's it.
It's just a couple things.
Yeah. Oh, and it does have one of those electric throttle controllers, which actually made more of a difference than I thought it would.
Okay.
Really like it.
So good. I have been knocking around possibly getting one for my Ram.
I bought a cheap Chinese one off eBay for like $100, and it
Really?
works just as well as a pedal commander. Yeah, I mean, it's two harnesses. Basically, you unplug the electric throttle and bop bop. You just put it in between the stock things. It plugs right up, and it has like 9 settings of aggressiveness. I think I have mine on like 8 of 9.
Really? Okay.
So when you give it gas, it just goes.
Right. Have you ever gone to the economy mode? Does that seem to make any difference? Is it just yeah, okay. I was just wondering if it more slowly ramps up. Like I would probably be the same as you on aggressive mode, because I live 3 minutes from work.
Okay.
So it's full throttle there, full throttle back.
Yeah.
But that's good to know, because I've been kicking that around. Like I kind of want one. I don't know. You read some stuff that says it's stupid and it doesn't work, and some people say it works great.
Says it's dumb, but like part of enjoying a car is, I mean, yes, I know it's not adding any horsepower, right? I know that, but
it feels like it though, probably.
Oh yeah, I mean, but throttle response is hugely important in driving experience. Like it just feels so bad when you're like, huh, and it goes, it's just not great. But with this, I mean, I give it gas and it's pushing me back in my seat, and I'm like, oh shoot, I actually dialed it back to 8. I had it at 9, and a couple of times I was like embarrassed, because I would try and gently leave a stoplight and I'd be like, take off. And I'm like,
I think in the winter I would dial it down in the snow, and then springtime ramp it back up, because I get sideways fairly easily in the Ram in the snow. So, and it snows quite a bit here. So, so what's it like then to bounce from driving the Q50 to the Xterra? Because you must feel like you're a million feet in the air.
Yeah.
In the Xterra.
Yeah. It's actually, it's one of my favorite things. Like I've had, for the last 10 or 12 years, I've just been a 2-car person for that exact reason, because there are things that I like sometimes I like being that high up, like probably like you feel in your truck, right? You kind of feel like you're big and you're not really worried about people, bullying you or pushing up on you or whatever. You can kind of get into lanes if you need to and stuff. And it's just a different experience. And like in the winter, it's nice to have, the clearance and the 4-wheel drive and just be able to kind of go through everything. And then in the summer, then I get the excitement of like a clean car. Like I don't really wash the truck. That's my like off-road truck. And then the car is like spotless all the time. Like I keep the car spotless as I can. It's my nice shiny ride that people look at and go, "Ooh, that's really nice." And then the truck is like ugh, what's wrong with this guy? What's he doing? You know, why does he have gas cans on the side of his truck? So it's just like totally different vibes, but like there's fun to both of them. So, and since I try and drive them, I mean, I'm basically splitting the mile. So I'm keeping
Right.
them, you know, nicer and lower mileage for longer. But, you know, in the winter, I get excited because I get to drive the truck more. And in the summer, I get excited to drive the car more. And it just makes it more fun, I think. I enjoy it.
Right. Uh, so kind of switching back to overlanding.
Sure.
So if someone came to you and said, "Hey, I want to get into overlanding. What should I look for in a vehicle?" What would you tell them?
Sure. Well, I mean, yeah, I've done a few videos on that because that is a question I get asked a lot. And, you know, there are a lot of variables that go into it. So, like, it depends on what kind of trips you want to take. Like, if you are, you know, some people are very okay with like going to state parks and paying 20, 30 bucks to stay in a campground, right? If you're going to do that, it really doesn't matter. Like, having something like a Subaru or something would be more than capable enough to do most of the stuff, would work in winter year round, and would get you mid to high 20s for gas mileage, right? So if that makes more sense, then that may be good. You know, in my case, I like to try and go do challenging trails and stuff. I like to go to the land between the lakes down in Kentucky and like tackle 300 roads where it's, you know, super off camber and a bunch of like big mud puddles and things like that. So I need clearance and lockers and that, you know, like that kind of stuff, but not everybody needs it. I mean, I think the biggest things to think about are, you know, how many people are you taking? How much gear do you have to take, right? You've got to be able to take your stuff or it doesn't make
Right.
any sense. Like having a Corolla while getting really great gas mileage and going to state parks would probably work. If you can't get your family and your stuff in it, it's still not going to work, right?
Right.
But you also don't have to get drug into the hype, right? You don't have to have a giant, you know, Rubicon Jeep on 37s or 42s or anything like that
Sure,
to
you don't
do it.
have to.
You don't have to. It'd be more fun if you did.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, it really could be any vehicle. I mean, you know, the thing that I always kind of tell people is just try it with what you got, right? Like start, like you have a Ram 1500. A lot of people would say full sizes suck for overlanding. They're too big for the trails and you're going to just
Right.
scratch down the side of it and all this,
Yeah.
you know, but you don't have to go through those crazy trails. Like just go and do it. You could probably get away with that truck for 2 or 3 years before you really figure out, I like doing these kind of trails. I'm in this, you know, area of the country. These are the things I have access to. I need better gas mileage because I got to drive 10 hours versus I'm 1 hour away from a national forest. Like all that stuff plays in, but just use what you got and get started. And then you'll learn really quickly what you need, I think.
Right. So like I've thought about doing that with the Ram and I thought, well, I don't want to scratch the crap out of it.
If it's
Until
newer,
I'm
then yeah.
yeah,
Sure.
until I'm done paying it off at least.
Right.
um
I don't blame you.
so of all the parts that you've bought, are there any that you thought, okay, you need to spend the money on this to get a quality part versus some of them, like you said, kind of with the throttle commander where I bought a Chinese $100 one, right? So what would you say that you should spend money on versus what you can skimp on?
That's a really good question. You know, I historically have been really cheap in budget. I
Yeah,
mean, I have two
me too.
cars, so I'm kind of like, look, if I can get a set of brakes for 160 bucks for rotors and pads and everything, I'm going to do that. But perfect example, my IQ right now, I did the brakes a year ago and they are squealing like crazy already. So I'm like, so I just spent the money and spent almost as much as I spent on the rotors and the pads last time, just on pads, because I'm just going to replace those. And I think that will solve my squeaking problem. But so in the past, I would have said buy as much as you can cheap, right? But I'm kind of starting to lean towards the thing that really clicked in my mind is I do almost all my own maintenance.
Yeah.
So you got to weigh in that time too, right? Like even if I'm saving, you know, 30%, 40%, like a significant amount, if I have to do it every year, if I have to do brakes every year, that's
Yeah.
worth something too. I'd rather just get 3 years out of a set of brakes, you know, and do it once every 3 years for a couple bucks more, right?
Right.
Things though, to your question, that's kind of a general answer right now. Like the real pieces of gear where you need to spend money, I did finally commit and buy a really expensive awning for my truck.
Okay.
I had a $150 tough stuff awning. It was fine. It was great, but it was a pain in the butt to set up. One person, you look like you're wrestling with a tarp, right? Like you're trying to pull these poles out by yourself and drop these things down. It was such a pain to set up that I never used it. And so I was like, well, that was a waste of 150 bucks. And so I bought an OVS 180 awning. It was about $700. So it was a lot more.
Right.
But it's basically like my home when I'm camping, right? Like it's a 180, so it has a lot more coverage. It has self-supporting aluminum arms. It's really high quality. It has zippers so you could zip in walls. So you could use it in the winter, like put a propane fire pit under it and just basically live under this thing. I can set it up by myself without looking like a total idiot. So I use it every time I go. And so like that was a really tough pill to swallow for me, but I've had it for like a year and a half now. It still looks brand new. It still works perfectly. I mean, I think I'll have that thing for the next 2 trucks probably, you know,
Right.
and I could probably sell it for 500 right now if I wanted to. So
Hmm.
awnings, you know, true overlanding gear, there's a lot of stuff with overlanding slapped on it. So I
Right.
always go and look, right? Like I try and figure out like what problem is it solving, and is there something I could use that isn't from like, you know, a CVT or somebody that's going to charge me $60 for a $4 thing. But if it's something that's exclusively set up for overlanding, like an awning, sometimes rooftop tents, you know, like there's
Right.
lots of people buying Chinese tents and stuff, and they're sketchy. They're scary.
Right.
Like you're just not going to get the use out of them that you would from a more expensive tent in some situations. But you know, but I'm also not necessarily advocating just for rooftop tents, because that's a huge expense too. You could get a really nice ground tent for a couple $100. So yeah, I think shelter is important. I would say like grills. I have a $40 Coleman grill and it works fine.
Yeah.
You don't have to spend $1 million on that. So it's the sheltery stuff. If I had to put a
Mhm.
category on it, I'd say shelter type stuff.
Right. How important is the lighting?
Lighting is somewhat, I have 1 million lights and I don't use like 5/6
Right.
of them. So you mean like, well, are you talking like headlights or like around camp lighting?
No, like, so yeah, you have like the spotlights that like I've seen you have like attached to the hood and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Like, how important does
Yeah.
that stuff
Okay.
actually become on the trail?
I'm with you. So, I mean, you know, really, you are not going to use it most of the time. So, like that phrase "lockers before light bars" is definitely true. Although lockers aren't really that necessary either, unless you're doing super crazy
Extreme.
stuff.
Right.
The reason I have it is literally based in fear. Like, I took a trip with a buddy to the Trans-Wisconsin Adventure Trail. We were there for 4 days, and I mean, I've never like Wisconsin is in areas where that trail goes barren. Like,
Mhm.
I mean, no cities, no light. So it's pitch black and there are deer everywhere. And I went up there with my stock Xterra, and mine is not a Pro 4X or an off-road trim. So I don't have the lights on the roof.
Right.
And I was terrified. I mean, I'm driving and you just, all of a sudden 7 deer would go across the road 50 feet in front of you and I'm jamming on the brakes. And so then I was like, okay, I'm gonna be traveling. Like, I want to do this for like long weekends and stuff. So there's gonna be times where I'm gonna get caught out in the dark, and I don't want to be like risking wrecking my truck in the middle of nowhere because I can't see, right? So then that fear sort of drove me to like my current way over the top lighting setup. But
Right.
yeah.
So the stock headlights on the Ram were not great at night. And so I decided I bought new bulbs, like brighter bulbs, like the Silver
Sure.
Stars or whatever. And then I bought 2 round off-road lights that I mounted actually behind the grill.
Nice.
But
That's cool.
so the headlights made a huge difference. The ones behind the grill made almost no difference.
Right.
Like they're
Yeah.
purely for looks. You
Yeah.
can't see any better.
Yeah. Lighting is a really weird, crazy one where like I just, again, being cheap historically, like I refuse to spend $400 on a pair of ditch lights, you know,
Yeah.
like I'm sure they're amazing. I'm sure that they last for a really long time. My sweet spot there, and I do highly recommend them, are like the things I have on my roof, aux beam stuff.
Yeah.
It's very reasonably priced, and I'm not sponsored by them or anything. This is just,
Right.
I bought every piece of aux beam gear that I've got. I wish they would reach out to me because I feel like I'm working for them. But like my headlights were aux beam replacement LED headlights, and they probably quadrupled the output of my stock headlights. Those ones on the roof were $60 a pair, and I put 4 of them up there, so 2 pair. So $120. And I mean, if you saw that video, like,
Yeah,
you turn those things on and you don't even need the rest of your lights. They basically wash everything else out. They're amazing.
wow.
So yeah, if you're looking for cheap but still good lights, aux beams have been really, really good for me. And they're a fraction of the price of like a Rigid or a Diode Dynamics or anything like that.
Right.
So.
Nice. Okay, so I have one more. Well, I had 2 questions, but I think I can put them into one.
Okay.
So A, what is your dream vehicle?
Ooh.
But part B, what would be, sorry, okay, let me read this properly. If you could only have one vehicle for the rest of your life, but it had to serve all your purposes, what would it be?
Oh my gosh. That's really tough because I literally have to choose. Like, as you can tell, I'm a fast car person and an off-road person.
Right.
So
So
I
you
have
need
to,
like a fast truck.
yeah. I mean, you know, I would, if I could literally only have one car, I'd get a GTR. I mean, in a heartbeat, but it'd be pretty
Right.
tough to overland in that. Put some air suspension on it or something so I could lift it up and take it off road. But I mean, a GTR is like my dream car just in general. I would love to
Right.
have a GTR. But I mean, realistically, for like real world stuff, God, it's so tough. I mean, I don't know if I would go with a Nissan, you know, like if I could have anything, that's the toughest question I think I've ever been asked in my life. I mean, I like the new 2022 Frontier a lot. I think
Yeah,
it'd be a
they're
great
nice.
daily driver. I think with a small lift and some like 33s, it would be, perfectly capable off road. It's got tons of technology finally packed into it. They finally updated the looks of it. I really like it. That's like, I've kind of been thinking of that. Like that'll probably be my next truck in a few years when
Right.
depreciation has helped me buy one for much cheaper. And that would be reasonable, right? Like that would be the responsible thing to say. But I mean, I would probably say that, or maybe even one of the new Pathfinders, because I really like the new Pathfinders a lot. And then it would give me more enclosed space. So you could use it for family. It's decent looking. You could use it for off-roading, but probably the Frontier is the most reasonable, I guess, of all of them. But,
Well, it doesn't
and then
have
I'll
to be
just steal a
reasonable. It's
GTR.
one vehicle.
I know. I know. I'll just have to steal a GTR or something, I guess.
Right.
So
That's awesome.
not tell anyone I own it, borrow it.
So you want to tell everybody about your show real quick before
Sure.
we wrap up?
Oh, sure. Thanks, of course, for having me on the show.
No.
I appreciate that. But yeah, All Things Overlanding is my YouTube channel. I've got a Facebook page. I've got an Instagram page, Patreon page, of course, because we all have to do that. And then a podcast, right? So I do a podcast for it too. That's actually probably one of my bigger things, I guess. I just don't think of it. I'm more like focused on YouTube, but it's about, everything to do with overlanding. So again, perfect for like beginners and stuff, because I've only been doing it for a couple of years too myself. So like, I'm by no means saying I'm any sort of expert. I'm just trying to take my experiences and like all of the numerous pieces of gear that I bought that were completely wrong that I've learned from, and trying to pass that on to other people to help them save money and save time and get into overlanding a little bit easier. No judgment, nothing like that. So I'd love to, anybody that wants to come hang out, check out the Facebook, check out Instagram, check out YouTube, subscribe and join the conversation. I'd love to have you.
Thanks again for listening to the Auto Riff. Did you know that for the low price of nothing a day, you can share this show with your friends and help the show grow? That's right. It'll cost you nothing. That's so much cheaper than any amount of money. Help the show out by liking and subscribing on YouTube and leaving a review for the podcast. Thank you again, and keep the rubber side down.